This is the 8-9 Combo.
This is the 8-9 Combo. I'm Brett McKay. This is Harry Jones. And, mate, how is the Munster jet lag handling you right now?
How's it, man? No, I'm okay. As you know, must have been born on an airplane because I can handle the jet lag. I don't know if you've ever wondered, if you've ever found yourself
feels like you
wondering,
live on one at times.
Yeah. If you ever find yourself wondering, is this too hard? This job we do, this side gig we do, the hours we spend thinking and designing and platforming and storyboarding and scenario painting,
producing and creating.
Well, wonder no more, because I just learned that 33 of the Fortune 100 company CEOs, so 33 of those CEOs, have frozen their sperm, and it goes for $6,000 per milliliter, this CEO sperm. So all you got to do, I mean, you can be the cut rate, just like you do your cut rate calligraphy. You just sell yours for like, I don't know, $100 for spunk from the McKay Canberra spunk varietal, and we don't have to do this anymore.
This is not the opening I was expecting.
Oh, maybe I do have jet lag. Fuck.
That would explain a lot. It would
possible.
really explain a lot. Yeah, righto. Well, let's get straight into it. Let's get straight into our here's cheers, and I'll kick you off, mate, with news in the last 24 hours that Ben Youngs has pulled the pin. Leicester club legend confirmed this week that he's playing his last season of rugby, 127 tests, 2 of the 2013 Lions, 4 Six Nations titles, 5 premierships, 330 plus appearances for the Tigers. Said that being a one club player was what meant the most to him. So he had offers in France, had offers in Japan. He's gone, no, I'm done. Maybe the pull of full-time podcasting was too much for him. That's too strong.
I know the Youngs family is very deeply ingrained in that area and beloved. Gone through all kinds of things with the fan base, but truly he's a loved guy, and it's actually interesting to go that long time in one club. I guess rugby.
Yeah.
If there was a more sport still that's sort of professional, although I don't know if we are. Sometimes when you read the news about our money, I feel like it is the sport where people do stay in one place. Speaking of, my cheers is for Munster, the fans of Munster, and how they handle a tough loss with questionable adjudicating in the very, 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 very weak Irk, as Stephen Donald reminded us. But
very low level.
I was in Limerick, and so I was actually able to see exactly how the crowd reacted to things that even while it was going on seemed odd. And Cameron Honeycomb, instead of a tap and go, he needed the ball, and it was awarded. Marcel Coetzee scored a try from that. So, tough things. It also went the other way, by the way. There was a clear head-to-head that didn't even get carded that helped the Munster fans. But let's just say that the losing team, who's a home team, it was a tough loss to take, 16-13, and I was able to see how they handled it, and also in the suite at the end where the Bulls were welcomed, have beers, had a great talk with the scariest Bull of all, Cobus Visa, and there was a band and a party. And I just thought, that's really important in rugby, that we don't say, who did this to us, and go victimhood all the time, because our game is too complicated to freeze down into 1 or 2 or 3 things. And good on you, Munster fans. I want to learn from that, because I'm not always as good as that. To win well and lose well. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I've got a little bonus one for you. How often have you seen a kick it goal hit a post? Happens every second weekend, right? How often have you seen a ball hit post and then crossbar?
Oh, ricochet! I like that.
Maybe,
I've seen it before.
Once a year.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Marcus Smith on the weekend hit a conversion from out wide. It hit the right hand upright, hit the crossbar, hit the left hand upright, hit the crossbar again, and then didn't go over. 4 times.
Pinball wizard, baby. Bing, bing, bing,
4 times.
That's gotta hurt.
I've never, ever. And like he hit the ball well, bent down to kick up the tee, and he sort of looked at him and went, like he didn't know how to react to it. It was no one has ever seen it. The commentators were stunned. Yeah. That's crazy talk. We welcome back Jamie Wall for a great rugby chat in just a moment. But mate, first, tell the nice people why we would love them to subscribe to the 8-9 Combo.
Because we love you, so show your love for us. It's a reciprocal relationship. I'm never going to have another non-reciprocal relationship in my life. So I subscribe to you. You subscribe to us. If you really love us,
I don't
you'll do it.
I don't know that blackmail was the way that we were going to do this.
I literally worked on a blackmail case all day, so I'm in blackmail mode. I'm very sorry. I apologize.
There you go.
Do what you want.
There you go. There you go. If you are watching us on the 8-9 YouTube, then just hit the red subscribe button just down there in the bottom corner. We are less than 200 now off 5,000 subscribers. We can't wait to get there. And if you're listening to us via Spotify, via Apple Pods, any of the podcast platforms, hit like, hit follow, hit subscribe, whatever it needs to be to make sure that you do not miss a show. We were all set to welcome Crusaders CEO Colin Mansbridge back to the 8-9 this week, but a welcome but late family reunion has meant that he'll come back. We'll come back to Colin in the next few weeks. But into the void to give us the New Zealand perspective on all things rugby, and at very short notice, for which we're incredibly grateful, it is great to welcome back to the 8-9 Combo, friend of the pod, friend of South Africa, Jamie Wall. Hello, mate. Welcome back. How are you?
Hey, boys. Good, thank you. I'm not missing the irony of being subbed in for Colin Mansbridge, who's the CEO of my favourite team.
Wow.
Yeah. Well,
everyone go on Jamie Wall's social media and see the special venom he sometimes shows for the Crusaders.
He does love the Crusaders.
It's all in good fun. Colin and I are good friends, so
of course. It sort of feels like a bit of like a ready or not, the Crusaders are back this year, which then sort of makes you wonder, what on earth happened last year to them?
That's a really good question. I don't think anyone's particularly surprised that the Crusaders are good again, because if you look at their team, I mean, they're putting out more All Blacks than not every weekend. So I think really looking back at last year, you can start to go, okay, they had a really rough draw. I'll give them that. They started off with some really difficult games. They had a few key injuries that really affected the way they play. They had a new coach as well. But really, though, even all of those things put together don't add up to losing to a bad Waratahs team twice.
Yeah.
Like that is that. I don't know what happened to them last year. It just felt like everything that could have possibly gone wrong went wrong, and that they kind of stopped believing in themselves really early on in the piece. So I'd love to know, maybe a few years down the track, when some guys have moved on and they're sort of comfortable at talking about like what really happened last year. I don't think we're going to know any time now, but it would be fascinating to find out.
It feels like we're going to have to wait for Scott Barrett's biography.
Oh, that'll be probably the most interesting part of it. I can tell you that much. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
he's
I feel like Scooter would have a very short autobiography. It would just be like, I've called him the prefect, the hallway pounder. He looks like a 1955's prefect walking around pounding people. But no, the only variable, Jamie, really is the coach transition. Not so much that Rob Penny's a bad coach, because look, he can steer the ship, but just the change. We've all been around players enough to know that they're very superstitious, routine-based people. And they like their things. And they like things to go the same way. Is it just simply that even a great team like the Crusaders, as much as we hate them, they're great, they can have that little transitions period?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think we all thought there was going to be some sort of drop-off last year. They went in, they weren't favourites and everything, but it was never supposed to be that dramatic. Like they fell really down. And like that to me is, while we sit here and we talk about how great this season of Super Rugby has been, and it has been. I mean, I think people have forgotten just how interesting last year was because of
true.
So this time last year, we were writing things about how this is the greatest year of Super Rugby because we didn't know what was going to happen. And, it wasn't just about who was going to play the Crusaders in the final in Christchurch and lose to them for the first time in 7 years.
Yes.
And as it turned out, it ended up being in hindsight, a relatively predictable Super Rugby, because the Blues were just untouchable by the end of it. Now I feel like that's fed into like a proper season now where you have these big teams playing well. The Crusaders are back to their best, but there is still that kind of element of like, well, are they really back to as good as they should be? You have, they're relying on James O'Connor to win them games, and that's no slight on James O'Connor, but it's something about like if you'd said during Scott Robertson's era that they'd be relying on a 34-year-old former Wallaby to be their masterstroke, like surely you can come up with something in your own area before that. Not saying that that's wrong. I've really enjoyed James O'Connor's contribution to the Crusaders and to Super Rugby this year. It's been different and it's been cool, and it's opened up a lot of discussions about how we can potentially do more of this sort of thing.
Yes,
but it has said a lot about the Crusaders, and that perhaps that the dynasty that they'd built was more about one guy than about everything else. Yeah. Maybe that's something you can talk to Colin about next time.
Yeah, it was certainly a question that we're going to ask, and I've written a bit of a thing on James O'Connor this week for Rugby Pass, and basically saying that like whether we pick him or not, he has to be in the frame for the Wallabies this year. He has to be in the discussion. Pick him, don't pick him, it doesn't matter, but he has to be part of that conversation. And so one of the questions I was going to ask Colin was that like James O'Connor isn't just the only thing that has changed in the Crusaders this year. So how close did they come to moving Rob Penny on last year? Because it felt there for a little period where it could have happened.
Yeah, it did. I think from an outsider looking in on the Crusaders, like, yeah, you would have thought that they would have basically had their finger on the trigger. I don't think it actually got that close. I think that they had a deal where he was coming in for 2 years to basically transition someone else into the, which again, I don't particularly understand either. I'm like of the case of like, well, what do you need a caretaker coach for? In a situation like this, if your systems are that well set up, like what's the point, basically. But then again, I mean, I think we all kind of presumed that he would have, but the Crusaders have their own way of doing things.
Yeah,
down there. So when it came through that he was staying, it's not something I would have done, to be honest. I think it shows that there is an element of the amateur era that it still exists in rugby, in the way that coaches get treated after poor results and things. You kind of saw it with Ian Foster a little bit. Like he should have been gone 2 years into his reign. But yeah, it just kind of feels like he had a set deal in place, and it's going to be up at the end of this year. They're going to bring someone else who was supposed to be Tamati Ellison, who's now not there anymore. He's with the All Blacks now, so that's kind of cooked their plans a little bit. So just who's going to take over, or whether Rob Penny ends up just staying, might end up being the case.
If he gets the Crusaders back into a semi-final this year, even if they go no further than that, I mean, it'd be rough to punt the guy that brought them from 10th or 11th back to the semi-finals.
Yeah, but he put them in 10th and 11th.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. But
I mean, the thing is that I mean, coming into this season, they can't possibly have been much worse. So anything's an improvement. They are playing some really good football. He has got some really good players, and he has put them he has put the pieces together quite well, I think, this season, where he didn't last year. So yeah, maybe, and they were briefly top of the table last week. So
yeah,
and it is very much looking like, if you would ask, if I had to put money on it, it's going to come down to they're going to play a pretty big role in the business end of this whole thing, I think.
Yeah, no question about that.
It's interesting. I mean, we like to break things down. We all have our pet theories. Some people like cohesion markers, and some people like to have X's and O's and talk about players. The truth is, he's a young man, and mental and attitude and culture, the dreaded C word, can actually matter. I just think that once you start winning, young men can go, oh, we're winning. Winning solves a lot of things. And a seasoned operator like James O'Connor, although I'm kind of thinking shit trolling for the Crusaders. Every year, bring in a 34-year-old, probably be like Bernard Foley next. Just keep running them in there and winning, just to show the rest of the Kiwi teams that they're the best.
Quade Cooper's leaving Kintetsu. Just saying.
But Jamie, there's been a lot of talk about the gap closing. I think it's undeniable by this point, sort of 9 whatever rounds in, that we know the gap has closed. But that's from both ends. It looks like there is not quite the imperiousness of some one Kiwi team. It's more like a couple, and they're not as good. And then the Aussie teams have lifted their standards. Does that lead? And I also saw the Super Rugby, who keeps putting out stats to show that it's great. It said this was the 6th closest margin year average. So it wasn't, not quite as as they first portrayed it.
I think that all this talk about how great Super Rugby's been this year is suffering from a bit of recency bias, because especially considering it's from a fan base that loves to talk about how much better things were in the old days as well. Everyone seems to be forgetting that, this was a really tough competition back in the day. I think it was the first season when the Blues won it. They had 50 put on them by the Reds, like in the week before the semi-finals.
Jesus.
So, they were still very dominant team, obviously, with running out 13 All Blacks every week. But still, there were those kind of results. This year has been, I think it's probably been good because you've had some serious upsets. Like Moana beating the Crusaders, for example.
In Christchurch,
in Christchurch, and not just beating them, like really kicking their ass as well. And beating the Hurricanes as well. And
I think Moana getting a fan base and really having a feel there, Jamie, isn't that a big deal as well? Because now there's not really a bottom of the comp. I mean, anyone can beat you.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends where you play the draw.
Exactly.
And also where you play the Waratahs, by those things as well. It does feel like there's just kind of something on every game. There's not. You look at each weekend, and there only feels like there's sort of one at most 2 games where you can go, okay, well, I know who's going to win that. And then the first 3 weeks of the competition, just everything was up in the air. Like everyone was beating everybody, and I had a good chat with Jack Mesley. I'm sure you guys did as well before the season, and that was his big thing. Was he said something has to ride on every single game, and we're getting now to the late rounds of the competition, and it feels like there is something riding on every single game. Everyone's still kind of in contention. There's some serious question marks over whether defending champions will even make the playoffs. For the second year in a row. As well. So that's sort of where that's sort of where it wants to be as a comp, is that you need these storylines. You need more of a storyline than just who is going to lose to the Crusaders in the final. And that was, with all due respect to Crusaders, because it's not their fault they're winning, and that's what they're there to do. It's sort of everyone else's fault for not being able to kind of keep up with them. And it also needs a proper showcase of a final. And again, it's not the Crusaders' fault they don't have a bloody stadium yet, but they will next year. But to have the final played in what is essentially just a pile of scaffolding around a club ground is not a great look for a tournament. It needs to be played at a place like Eden Park last year, played at a place like Accor Stadium, like it was for that amazing final back in 2014, Ellis Park. That's where this competition needs to have its showpiece at. And it's not going to be at Eden Park this year, unfortunately.
No.
Probably not going to be at Allianz Stadium either. But at least they can sort of look at it and go, okay, what's the next step with this thing? Do we just set the final up so it's always going to be at somewhere big, somewhere decent, like the NRL does, like football does,
the Premiership does,
like the Super Bowl. That's where the final gets played. It's always going to be there, and we're going to, make it so people come around this. I think that's the next step for this competition, because at the moment, when you look at it that way, it's always going to look like a runner-up to the competitions that it's competing against in the NRL and the AFL.
Yeah. But so the interesting thing there, though, is that obviously being played across borders makes that difficult, because I mean the Super Bowl moves around, but that moves around as an event. It's not the top seeded team hosting every year. So the RFU has Twickenham, and obviously France can play the final in Paris every year, but the ERC has to move around. And even if you narrowed it down and said, well, we will play, yeah, exactly right. Even if you'll narrow it down and say, if a New Zealand team finishes first, we'll play it at Eden Park. If an Australian team finishes first, we'll play it at Homebush, or we'll play it at Suncorp Stadium, something like that. The distances between the teams and for the fan bases means that it's still going to be a risk that fans just will not travel for it. And then I think you've got a substandard spectacle anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. But I mean, to me, I feel like looking at that, like rugby's got a really like mind of always thinking like that. When if you look at the NRL, you look at Magic Round. If you would to sort of come up with the idea of Magic Round before it happened and just go, we're going to put the whole round in one place and everyone's fans are going to travel to watch like a club round in one spot. I don't think many people would have thought that would work, but they got it to work. I know that they tried the Super Round and everything. I mean, but the problem is that they just couldn't quite get it right, because Melbourne was the only place that kind of wanted it.
Yes.
And it's not the right place to have it. If you were to set this up and just say, hey, the Super Rugby final is going to be at Eden Park on this date, start buying tickets now, or it's going to be in Sydney, or it's going to be in Brisbane, or wherever. Start buying tickets now to it at the start of the season. I reckon you can do it. If you do it properly, I reckon it'll work.
Yeah, on the Champions and the Challenge Cup, what they do is they, have Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and it's for semis and finals, and so it's for a whole sort of fortnight, and people can get around it and they can start buying. I mean, you can kind of know if your team's in with a shout, and then you have the resale market anyway. And a part of this is, Brett, I think sometimes we pretend that we are flush with money, and we really know we're not, and we have to find ways to make money.
Yeah.
So,
a
rinky-dink stadium where no one's there. It's kind of a washout. My question for you guys, Garrison Keillor had this satire show on radio in the US that it's a great line. He would introduce it as Lake Wobegon, where all the children are above average. And sometimes when we talk about Super Rugby, I always feel like people are selling it like every team was above average. Every game is wonderful. Who do you think is the average team this year? Because I thought the Canes versus the Force was kind of the battle of the averages. And then they drew.
And probably fitting that it was a draw in the end. Yeah, that's actually not a bad
illustration. Is that where it is? Is that the average, the Western Force?
That's a really good question, because for me, the Force are above average. Maybe I'm being a little unkind, because
I think they're overachieving.
As a New Zealander, they're not the top of mind. In fact, they'd be probably the last team that I'd sort of think about. Other than that's where guys from Wellington seem to end up playing at the back end of the they stop there on their way back from Europe, and have a season there, and then they come back. But anyway, I feel like the Force are overachieving. So to call them average would be a little.
I see what you mean. I
think the Waratahs are the same, because after years and years of underachieving, they're now overachieving, even though they can't win away from home. So it's a really difficult one. I would say probably the Hurricanes would probably fit the bill the most, because they're not anywhere near as good as they were last year. But there's definitely some good reasons for that, because they lost their starting midfield, they lost their starting halfback, and I mean, Artie wasn't there last year, but he's gone, which probably would have chucked a bit of a spanner in the works. And I think most importantly of all, they don't have Geordie Barrett, because their game plan completely revolved around him. And you can see what he's done up in Leinster was they've pretty much taken that blueprint and And it's I mean, they were good already anyway, but he's definitely been the biggest loss out of any player in any team from last year to this year, I think. And you can see it in the Hurricanes results. Like they're a good team, but you just know that at about the 60-minute mark, they're just gonna they're running out of ideas, basically. And yeah, it was incredibly frustrating watch against the Force last week, because that's a game that last year's Hurricanes would have run away with. And to see them just basically butcher that game is. I mean, I'm actually kind of pleased it was a draw, because I think the Force played well enough. They deserve to get something out of it. But yeah, I think to answer your question, I'd say it'd be the Hurricanes.
How about the comms guys and maybe even the captain in that extra time, not knowing what the hell was going on and how it works and how long it goes and what the right tactics are? It was insanity.
Well, and then even the hot takes that have flown ever since, and they were flowing out of the post-game press conferences. They were suddenly we're going, well, maybe we need to play more than 10 minutes, and do we need to go to kicking competitions? And we're like, well, 2 seasons ago we just had draws.
I like kicking competitions, but I think you get to pick the other team's kickers. So it's like whoever you have on the field,
you can nominate
opens
2
you up with one veto.
But then you have to nominate 2 for the opposition as well. Yeah, that's a good idea. It's a good idea. I'm a big fan of the kicking competition. I think we should see more of it. But yes, the fact that neither team in that moment exactly knew what, and Superpoint has changed this year from last year. There has been a couple little tweaks to it. So I can kind of get that to a degree. But the fact that no one knew quite what was going on was kind of indicative. And the way the two teams collectively lost their shit on the field without knowing what to do also spoke to how to how infrequently we see golden point in Super Rugby.
Oh yeah, for sure. If I'm kicking off in Super Point, I'm kicking the coffin corner. I'm doing a high drop kick that lands, right in the corner there. I'm not doing what the comms guys were saying. It's really important to regain the ball from this and hold on to it forever. I'm like, I don't want to have the ball in my off at all. I want to. I do not want that.
And so that's been one of the changes, because last year it was a flip of a coin to work out who kick off. This year they've straight away just gone whoever scores first kicks off or receives or whatever it was. So they've just taken the chance out of it straight away. We've touched on the Blues, Jamie. So what on earth has happened to them this year? Harry a couple of weeks ago said, I think everyone's morphing into other teams. Last year's Crusaders have become last year's Blues have become this year's Crusaders. Last year's Crusaders have become this year's Chiefs, and you can sort of see the point. So, what has happened to the Blues? Why have they fallen off the perch like they have this year?
Well, probably the most obvious thing when people are talking about the Blues this year is everyone says, "Oh, well, everyone's figured them out and they know how to play against them." Like, I don't personally agree with that, because I think everyone figured them out pretty early last year. There just wasn't.
There's no surprises in the year ago.
You just couldn't stop them. Yeah.
You knew exactly what they were going to do. But when a team just comes straight at you and holds the ball for 20 phases in your 22, there's nothing you can do about it, even though you know that it's never going to move more than a meter past the ruck. I think what's actually happened is they've really missed Hoskins Satutu, who was firstly injured, then suspended. So missed, I think, 5 out of the first 6 games or so. And Akira Ioane, who's obviously moved off to Japan. And those guys were they're 2 big sledgehammers who were making that game plan work for them. And the guys that they got in to try and replicate what they could do, and they went through, I think, they had Anton Segner playing number 8, they had Cameron Saw-4 as well. They're just not as effective at doing that. They're good players, don't get me wrong, but they're not. It's as if Vern Cotter came in with a plan to basically just use those 2 guys and build everything out from around them. And them not being there has made a real difference to the way they played. I think to a lesser extent, it's taken Beauden Barrett a little while to kind of get used to the way that the Blues have played. I think Harry Plummer was much more adaptable at that last year. But if you've got Beauden Barrett, you're going to put him on the field. And so they've had to kind of just keep tweaking their game plan to fit them in. It has started working over the last few weeks. I think last weekend against the Crusaders was like their best effort of the year. I think they deserve to win that game. And had it been for a shot at goal, they would have. And I think that Barrett's influence has become a lot more pronounced over the last sort of 3 weeks. And it's just for their sake, it's a real shame that couldn't have happened right back at the start of the season, and that they'd been able to kind of fix a few more things on the fly when it kind of felt like their game plan was so prescribed that they didn't want to move away from it too much. That's my read on it. And then I just think also they've just been kind of unlucky. A lot of stuff that went right for them last year just hasn't this time around. They haven't been able to convert as many opportunities as they've been able to, and they haven't really had the rub of the green with the referees. That's my take on it. But it just also goes to show that there's just a few little things, and it's completely changed, much like what happened with the Crusaders last year. And from a competition point of view, it's really kind of encouraging for everyone else just to know that if there's just a few loose bolts here and there, that everything can kind of fall apart. And all you've got to do is make sure you've got everything you're good at, really screwed in tight, and you can stay ahead. Because I feel like that's what the Chiefs have been able to do this year. They have been able to keep it consistent. Like, they've had a couple of bad games that they've lost, but it's not like SOS stations for them just yet.
Yeah, we talk about close margins all the time and fine margins. And then when we try to analyze why something doesn't go quite right, and we say these things, which are all fine margins that Jamie just went through, we go, no, it has to be something bigger. I'm like, no, that's all it takes. And especially if you're in a high Panzer tank carry mode and you're two big carriers, because you need 9 guys to reload, 3-3-3. You got a cleaner and you got to have an inside and outside. So if you lose those 2 guys and your response is to bring in the German and some other guy, it's just not the same meters of contact. And I can see that will change the whole game plan. The one person who is doing really well and has done well and has not dropped off at all on Blues is the social media guy. Do you know him, Jamie? And is he one person? Are you him?
No, I do. I know
that guy's genius.
I know Tane. Yeah, his name's Tane Wolfgram. He's a young guy. I think he went to Auckland Grammar, just across the road. And he's very good at his job. He's very smart. He's also feels like he's the only social media manager who's brave enough to actually give Twitter a go. That big, dangerous battleground we know as Twitter, because he knows full well he has to come up against the likes of myself. But what we did do last year is he actually pulled me aside at a practice session, and we had a little chat, and we decided to have a little agreement that I wouldn't go as hard on them as I had in the years before, which was quite nice, I thought. So and I thought, well, I don't want to be a jerk. I've got to see these guys every week. So that's why a lot of my stuff is not so much aimed at the Blues, because we shook hands on it, and but he's a very talented young man. I got a lot of time for the Blues social media. It's something that a lot of other teams haven't put a lot of effort into, because they either don't have the money or they don't have the decision making sort of up top that really understands how important that it is. But I have to give credit to the Blues that it's one thing that they are head and shoulders above every other team, it seems, in that space. So it's hopefully other teams are listening and are watching, and that they decide to follow in the Blues path, because it's only something that's going to get more important as we go forward.
Is he a rugby guy? He's very creative, but is he rugby?
Oh yeah. He's a rugby guy. Yeah,
I love how he does funny things, like put the whole table upside down after a few matches. Looks good from here.
They've embraced the idea of banter as a way of engagement, and you talk about Twitter specifically, Jamie, and I feel like for most other, and this isn't even isolated to Super Rugby. So many teams in so many sports around the world would go, oh, do we really want to fire opposition fans up like that? Do we really want to give them a reason to do we want to give anyone a reason to dump on us in return? And you've still got to be prepared to take that in order to embrace it, but they've done it well. And even this week for the Reds, one of the first things I saw out of the Blues, and it might have even been Sunday afternoon, it was like, so Queensland, you got any wingers with cool nicknames this year? Which is a nice pointed little reference to Tim Ryan, the junkyard dog last year. But all right, well, this is the level that we're operating now. So it's good.
Honestly, why else be on those forums? I mean, I don't even get it. Like, if you're the sanctimonious type, Leinster does this too much. There are too many hashtags that are kind of just precious, and I don't know. It's just too stolid stage. And then you have others that are just minuscule. They don't even say anything. It's almost like they're just putting dates and calendars and some kind of window pane. The Blues man, I mean, he comes in there with some like serious shit. It's fun. I mean, I look forward to it.
It's good.
Yeah, it's a sanctimonious Irish rugby social media presence. Oh no.
A team of all of us, better than who we are.
Talk to us then, mate, about the state of rugby in New Zealand, generally speaking. Are things going as well, and is the game as healthy as perhaps we're being led to believe?
It's a great question. It's probably worth a podcast on its own, to be honest.
Yes.
But yes, in the way that it will always be the number one sport on TV and will always command the top headlines, and will always have the most transcendent presence in our culture. Yes. Can it be doing better? Yes, absolutely. But then again, I think we're in a period of time where I think every sport could be doing better. Rugby's biggest optics issue right now is crowd sizes, especially when you compare it to the Warriors and to the new football team that's launched in Auckland. Like, it feels as though because rugby has this massive market share of TV audience, they don't seem to care about whether people show up to games or not, because they know that they'll show up to the All Blacks, and the All Blacks do pay for everything. Like their gates, their sponsorship deals, their commercial deals pay for every other part. So financially, the crowds at Super Rugby games at NPC are kind of more of a nice to have.
Yeah.
Just purely from the NZ Rugby kind of top line point of view. So therefore, why they would kind of put money into what they see as an existing cost center is, I kind of get it from their point of view. On the flip side, I mean, for me, if you want this product to be seen as the most important thing in the country, it needs to be played in front of as big a crowds as possible. The All Blacks, are going to be playing less and less games at home. They're going to be more, I think they're only playing 4 games. Next year, I think the schedule will be about 14 tests, and only 4 of them will be at home,
in New Zealand,
thanks to the Nations Cup and everything like that. So, there's only so much you can kind of push the All Blacks as the face of the game when every weekend, you've got a full slate of Super Rugby games and the crowd sizes just aren't great. That's not to say that the crowds haven't been, acceptable. Like, they've definitely increased from last year. And also, like the Blues making the Super Rugby final last year is the only thing that was going to fill up Eden Park. That weekend, other than a national team playing. So it's still got that to kind of fall back on. It still has the most money, like by a significant amount. It still is the one thing that's propping up our pay TV service here. If that deal somehow fell over, Sky TV would be shutting their doors like that night.
Yeah.
If they couldn't broadcast rugby. I think the Warriors do a really, really good job of making themselves out to be probably a little bit bigger than what they really are, like in terms of the fact that they can count on 25,000 people will come to watch them play every week, every time they play a home game. Brett, we were talking about it, beforehand about how the rugby league in New Zealand basically starts and ends with the Warriors, though.
Yes.
And without them, the sport is really kind of irrelevant. Like, the Kiwis, even when they play the Kangaroos these days, don't even really get that much of a crowd. So I think if you are going to talk about rugby's health, it's more of a discussion about the health of just sport, just in general, in New Zealand, and how we are becoming far more of a couch-bound audience, I think.
Yep.
And that just the way that we don't have the same sort of population size or tradition of memberships as places like Sydney and Melbourne, where you can count on, 80,000 people showing up for an AFL game, for example. Like, that's just not going to happen here. There's just not enough people for that to be sustainable. So I think, to answer your question, it's probably not as unhealthy as a lot of headlines say, but it's probably not as healthy as what like New Zealand Rugby would tell you.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you put it that way, because certainly the headlines paint a story that doesn't read well. The expectation that the next broadcast deal with Sky will be lower. The whole Ineos debacle, the headlines around the Hurricanes and Wellington. There's from the outside looking in, it sort of feels like, ooh, is there something we need to worry about there? Because particularly, Harry, when you see what has happened with clubs in England and is happening in Wales at the moment, it doesn't take long for a headline to become an actual thing, and clubs then disappear.
Yeah, there's always whispers before it happens, right? And there's two approaches. One is finding the money from elsewhere and crowding it in. Other one is to cut player salaries, which is a race to the bottom. So there could be some New Zealand unions that can look at Wellington and say, oh, we're okay. But they did it by cutting player salary, which means that you're also going to see some Kiwis playing abroad because, you're 25, 26, you're not a lock solid All Black. Why not go abroad? And then you never really know what happens. So I think there's the player drain. I think for New Zealand is also the coach drain, in that if you took all the coaches that existed in New Zealand right now and put them all back home, players follow coaches. Players love coaches. Yep. Sometimes they want to go play for a coach. He's the guy who understood me. He's the one who picked me. And if you go down the list of people that are coaching abroad, and then one thing that's interesting to me, Jamie, Clayton McMillan gets the Munster deal, and everyone just kind of goes, oh, yeah, that's a good move for him. And I'm wondering why. I can see why it's a good move, but why is it so obvious that it's good for him to leave the Chiefs and go to Munster?
Yeah, fair observation there. I guess from our perspective, like our culture, and this isn't just a rugby thing, New Zealand's so far away from everything else that the idea of picking yourself up and going overseas and getting some experience and then bringing that worldly knowledge back with you is seen as something that New Zealanders just do, and if you haven't really done that with your life, then, like your opinion on things is probably going to count for less, especially when it's to do with big issues like coaching and things. And it's kind of telling that Scott Robertson got the All Black job without having to do this kind of OE kind of thing. Most people had presumed that in order to get this gig, you would need to go overseas, get some sort
like
of
Steve
experience.
Hansen did,
Yeah, and like Jamie Joseph and Tony Brown, like that was their big ticket item was like we've been in this situation overseas. We've taken like a not so great team and turned them into World Cup quarterfinalists and things like that. So I think it's a kind of a cultural thing that, you know, when you're a member of your family or someone you work with or whatever says, hey, I'm moving to London, you know, you generally say, like, oh, geez, I'm going to miss you, but hey, well done. This is going to be great.
Yeah. This will be good for you.
That's kind of the perception around McMillan. Also, you got to remember, like, he ended up with the Chiefs job by accident, and he's turned them into like a really from the disaster that Warren Gatland left behind him. He's turned them into a very, very good team full of very, very good All Blacks, and he's nurtured them and done that. There's, apart from winning the thing, which I feel like they've got a really good chance of doing this year, there's not much left for him to do here in New Zealand other than press for an All Black spot, which he's not going to be able to do until, you know, unless things go really pear-shaped, the next World Cup cycle after this, when he has to start getting in and start lobbying and come home and, you know, start getting us all writing articles about how he's the guy to succeed Scott Robertson and everything. And even that's not like a given, because Scott Robertson might end up being the greatest All Black coach of all time and he might want to do another term.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's I don't, and you say, like, yeah, there's this big exodus of coaches overseas. It's probably not as concerning to us as it probably is to other countries, because the production line of coaches is there. You know, you've got some pretty talented coaches all the way down to like the sort of lowest levels, and the pathway system for coaches here is pretty solid. So whoever they end up with next, you know, and bearing in mind what happened with the Crusaders last year, I think they're in safe hands, and so I think that's why the reaction is what you've referenced to before.
Yeah, could well be right.
I cannot figure out, guys. I cannot handicap it right now between the Chiefs and the Crusaders. If I had to just right now, gun to my head, who does it? They seem just 1A and 1B. Do either of you think you can feel the eventual power team?
I feel like the Chiefs are still a step or a gear ahead at this point. I think the Crusaders, and maybe it's the fact that they lost at home to Moana, the fact that they had a loss like that in them. The Chiefs haven't shown a chink like that this year. That's the big difference between them for me at the moment.
The trend line, to me,
I agree.
Looks good for Crusaders. Like they might be. I don't know the overused word ceiling. What do you think, Jamie? Do you think the Crusaders still have another gear to go to?
No, I think that's the difference between them and the Chiefs. I think we've actually seen the best out of the Crusaders, and you know they're still very good. But I still think the Chiefs have another level that they can get to, especially when they're playing at home at the Brisbane. Because I've done it 3 years in a row. That'll be 3 years in a row now that they've done it, and they will have this real bee in their bonnet about like we can't possibly let this happen to us again. You know, we can't do what was it? The Lions? Was it 3 in a row? Yeah. Not doing
losers.
Three lost grand finals. Yeah.
And especially if they get a home final as well. Personally, I'm hoping that the Reds finish top, because I wouldn't mind a trip to Brisbane. But I feel like I'm going to be going to Hamilton instead.
Yeah, it feels that way at the moment. We touched on we mentioned James O'Connor up top. Do you think we're edging closer to a point where the borders open within Super Rugby?
No, I don't, and here's why. Because I think that while it's a good idea on paper, it's just going to be too difficult to get New Zealand Rugby and Rugby Australia to agree on the way that it would work. It also, though, it has to be said, it is technically possible for this to happen, because all it would take is for Bowden Barrett to take his
sign a deal with the Waratahs,
and then sign a deal with the Waratahs.
Yes,
but then would the Waratahs pay him however many millions of dollars that he could get in Japan or France or whatever? No, he can't. They won't. And then also, just from a Wallabies point of view, it's going to be massively, I think, disruptive to whoever the Wallabies have in charge, their plans for the season. I think that that people don't really think about that as like, do Rugby Australia actually want this to happen? I don't think so. I don't think they do. I think they're in a really good spot right now because they've finally bitten the bullet and have 4 teams. And no disrespect to Jeff and the Melbourne Rebels, but that was the problem with them, and it's the competitiveness of their teams right now is testament to the fact that they were just spreading their talent way too thin.
Yeah.
And by consolidating it now, I mean, I don't see why, if I was in their position, I don't see why you would want to do that at all. So I think what it really comes down to is that other than the motivations of basically people like us playing these great guessing games of like, what makes
a good talk topic. Yeah,
it does. It makes a great conversation. Really, I don't think there's any motivation for it to happen, which is a shame because like really that it kind of should be, but I just don't see how it's workable.
It will be interesting if as it stands, there is nothing stopping Joe Schmidt picking James O'Connor. He is overseas eligible by however they are allowing overseas eligibility this year. O'Connor ticks every box, so he absolutely qualifies for that. Whether they will is going to be the $64 question because it feels like there is a can of worms on the other side of it if they do pick him. So we'll see. It'll be fascinating.
Speaking of cans of worms and incredible stories that could turn into books, what's your deal with Lawrence Delaglio and his amazing Technicolor brothel visits? Why do we always go back to that? It's amazing.
It's just a good gag. It always gets some good laughs, and for me it fundamentally pokes fun at the kind of British view of rugby and how it's held up as this great gentlemanly endeavor and you know what I mean, respect and all those things. And then you've always got I can just screenshot a thing of the English rugby captain spending £20,000 on cocaine and hookers. It's just funny by itself.
To be fair, I mean, just the spend itself is interesting. I mean, like what you get for that, yeah.
No, it's outrageous.
The rest.
No wonder we went bankrupt.
Exactly. But it's been a great chat as always. We thank you for giving us some time. We absolutely thank you for jumping in late notice when Cole suddenly had to pull out. But a chat that's worth having and a chat that we'll keep having over the coming years and months. I'm quite sure. Thanks for giving us some time once again.
No problem, guys. Always a pleasure.
This is the 8-9 combo with Brett McKay and Harry Jones, and mate, great to have Jamie Wall back on the 8-9. It's always a good chat, always enjoy it, and we are thankful that he's accepting our calls as always.
Jamie's a good fella. He also looks like he's trying to look like Damien Delende. He's doing the poor man's Damien Delende with a combination of mustache and the high and tight hair.
Could be. Might have to add a little bit of bulk to really wind it out, but he's could be working on it. We'll be back with the weekend post-mortem, looking at all the big games and all the big results out of the weekend on late Sunday, early Monday morning, depending on where you are in the rugby world. But that is always a great way to start the rugby week, and we love doing it. Games of the week, mate. There's a bit going on this weekend. We start with Super Rugby Pacific. It is round 11 there. And I think the two standout games there for me, Reds v Blues in Brisbane on Friday night, and then Brumbies Hurricanes in Canberra on Saturday night. For the Friday night game in Brisbane, I think it's hugely important for both teams. almost must win for both teams, but for very different reasons.
I think it's the Blues. I think it's one of the few. I think I pegged 3 away wins this weekend across all the comps. I think the aberrant jerseys, the red adorn will adopt the lack of Harry Wilson at the helm, and I just feel like the Blues are just getting it. It's the light bulb's coming on for the Blues.
Yeah, it's not a bad shout, and I think the Reds just come off a bye, but their last start against the Brumbies, I think there was an expectation that we haven't got Harry Wilson, we haven't got Filippo Daungunu, but it'll be all right, it'll be fine. We can bring in some young guys, and they're really good, and they're in our systems, and we've got a good program and all that. And it turns out they were the 2 guys they could afford to lose the least. And so, how they bounce back from that, I think will be fascinating. The
Brumbies will be fine, by the way. They're in the top 10 of the Harry Index, so come on.
I see that. We'll come to that in a minute. They can break further from that Australian pack. But then the Hurricanes, if they win, they can actually get into the top 6 too. So it's almost a must-win game for them as well with 6 rounds to play. So we'll see how that all plays out. It is round 15 of the ERC, and I think the 2 very obvious standout games there are the top of the list, the Friday night games. Glasgow
Friday
Munster,
night, baby.
Yeah, at the Scotstoun, Cardiff Bulls at the Arms Park. Both of them at the same time. We talked about it on the weekend. I'm still not sure about that as an idea, but Glasgow Munster is 2nd v 3rd. Cardiff Bulls is 6th v 7th. So there's so much jeopardy for both teams for both teams in each game. They are 2 really, really interesting contests.
Yeah, and Glasgow Bulls, that features number 5 and number 6 in the Harry Index. Glasgow plays on a 4G pitch, which the Bulls do not enjoy. Johan Goosen is on his day a really good fly-off, but he does not enjoy that sticky pitch. But Glasgow's gone. They're missing a few players, and this is a common theme, by the way. At this stage in the tournaments, even though Super Rugby is sort of 5 or 6 rounds behind the others or more, the top 14, you just find the absence is one of the key stories. So I would say that's one of my actual look forward to games of the week is the Bulls trying to knock off Glasgow, and it matters a lot because if the Bulls can do that, they would have taken points out of Munster and Glasgow, and then they go home sitting pretty.
The Bulls playing Cardiff,
and they would not have thought that going in. Those 2 fixtures, they would have said, losing bonus point or something might be nice. That does set them up very well. Glasgow has to show that they can handle being pummeled by Geordie Barrett's Leinster. So there's a big bounce back factor here for Franco Smith as well.
Yes, and I realise I've actually buggered up those games. I had Glasgow playing Munster and Cardiff playing the Bulls, but the other way around. My apologies there. But the point
Glasgow host the Bulls.
It's two really, really interesting games. I'll be really keen to check them out over the weekend at some point. I almost certainly won't watch them live, but they'll be interesting. I'll throw one other one in there, and I'm sure it's on your radar. Stormers v Benetton in Newland at Newlands on Saturday is 8th against 5th. So there's actually a bit going on there as well down in Cape Town. So I'm sure you'll fill me in on that one. I almost certainly won't.
Not worried about it. We're going to beat them by 25, 30 points. They're going to be just a big Joel party. Sasha is, I don't know if you watched all of the highlights. There was so many highlights just from Sasha that they couldn't even fit it into a highlight package. Now, just tackle once or twice, Stormers. Just tackle a little bit. Yeah.
We'll put a pin in that prediction and come back to it on in the post-mortem. It's round 15 of the Premiership as well. A couple of interesting games, particularly Sale v Saracens. They're equal on points. It's 4th against 5th. Basically, it's winner takes 4th. So that's the Friday night game there. That's an interesting one. And then Leicester got up to 2nd, winning last weekend, and then they host Harlequins at Welford Road on Saturday. And I actually wonder whether this is last chance for Quins. If they don't win this, suddenly they are a bit of a distance off the top 4.
Yeah, I think so. They probably already are, but I think you're right. That would put the death knell. That'd be the Michael Cheika stabbing the flag in the ground.
Yes.
Cheika's really got his players peaked. They're ready to go. It's a bit of a shame that for sale they're 4th on the log, even though they have one less loss than the Bears, Bristol Bears, and they have a better points differential. So that's where bonus points become irritating to me. It's a tight clump though, and I think really this is one of my favorite weekends across the board. If you're just looking for each league having meaningful games where you're almost in knockout mode already, kind of.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the Premiership is right now. It's sort of in knockout mode.
There's 2 points separate 2nd and 5th. So yeah, that's pretty good. Conversely, I actually find round 21 of the top 14 actually a hard round to get into, much the same as it was last week, because it's just sort of top teams playing bottom teams. And in the end, I've sort of picked out Clermont v Lyon on Saturday.
That's the one.
That's 7v6. Clermont must win that to stay in reach of the top 6. There's no doubt about that. And then maybe as a secondary, Bordeaux v La Rochelle. And for the same reason, La Rochelle have to win that to stay within reach. If they don't, I think they are done this year.
Lyon and Clermont is a really good match because they're pretty much at this point 21, whatever rounds in. They are tight. There's almost nothing to pick between them on the win-loss, on the points differential, on the power. They're both going to pick a proper team. And as you know, it's a six teams get into the post, right? I think it's the first 2 seeds wait. So it's a bit like Super Rugby.
I think that's right.
If you're Clermont or Lyon, you really cannot drop one here. I think it's almost knockout time.
Yep. No, I tend to agree with that. There's 5 rounds to play in the top 14. It's week 16, round 16 of League One in Japan. The pick there out of that, again, it's top teams playing bottom teams pretty much all the way through. But in the middle there, Shizuoka Blue Revs v Cannon Eagles on Sunday. That's 4th v 7th. Shizuoka have just been confirmed for their first ever final series. And Cannon are 1 point behind Suntory in 6. So Cannon can still sneak into the 6. So there's a bit of jeopardy around it, but otherwise it's a fairly run-of-the-mill round, I think, in Japan this weekend.
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't even looked at those fixtures. I've been poring over the ERC and Super Rugby, trying to get into some of the stats. So I'll have to look at that again before the weekend.
Yeah, well, you can take a bit of time to work out exactly how many games have been played in this weekend of Major League Rugby. It's round 11. There's actually been 1 game played already. So the New England Free Jacks beat RFC LA on Tuesday night. It would have been 23-21. RFC LA play again on Thursday. There's 3 teams are playing two games over this weekend, which sort of stretches about 5 days in the end. So, but yeah, RFC LA v San Diego Legion at UCLA on Saturday. That's 4th v 3rd in West. They're only a point between them. San Diego's had 4 straight losses, so there's a bit to play for there. And then I think Utah Warriors, Chicago Hounds in Salt Lake City on Saturday as well. That's going to be a good game as well. That's 2nd in West v 2nd in East. So I think that's probably the pick in Major League Rugby there. 8 rounds to go there, so still a little bit to go in their season, but it's ticking along nicely. There's a bit of movement around on the MLR tables.
Yeah, and you're looking for some parity with some top teams as well. I think leagues go well when you can identify the big powers, but then everyone's got a shot. I think it's coming along. There's a couple of easy beats still, but they're not as easy a beat as they were.
No, and there's some good teams that are down on the conference tables that would like to be higher too. So that's always a good sign. The Harry Index you referred to a couple of times through this, and you've narrowed it down to 10, albeit with 11 names in there. You mentioned that the Brumbies are in there now. Suddenly there's 3 Super Rugby teams in the top 10. I don't know that we've had that this year, have we? So for those playing along at home, Leinster, Bordeaux, Toulouse, Toulon, Glasgow, Bulls, Bath Crusaders, Chiefs, and then you've got Northampton Brumbies bracketed for 10th. Is that right?
It's a tough one because Super Rugby is only 9 in, so you would think it's not going to be 3 by the end. It might be, we don't know. But Chiefs 2 loss, Crusaders 2 loss, compared to like say Premiership, it's 14 rounds in and Bath has 2 losses. But the reason why Saints make it in there is because they're doing well.
I was going to ask this.
They're in the final 4 of the Big Boy Championship, Champions Cup, which and you have to pick. Sometimes you have to pick one or the other, and so Saints have suffered in the Premiership at this point, but they really are right in there with a proper shot at Leinster. So Brumbies still on the way up. They're 43 plus on the points differential. It was good to nil somebody. I really enjoyed seeing defense play a role there. I think if the Brumbies can sort of channel into that style and put teams away like decisively, not winning by 2 or 3, but doing that, I think they're going to march up, and just trust them a little bit more than the Reds right now. Yeah.
To give you an idea of how rare that happens in Super Rugby, I didn't know this until I heard him say it. Stephen Larkham said in Canberra this week this is only the 5th Brumbies team to keep a team to nil in 30 years of Super Rugby.
That's great.
That's a thing. So yeah,
especially in an era where attack is being so rewarded and everything officialdom and rules of the game shape is being pushed artificially in favor of attack. If you can nil somebody, none of these teams have bad attacks, so they can all score.
No, none of them have bad defenses either. So yeah.
By the way, Rassi Erasmus was on his pod, which is excellent stuff, and he was talking about how Steve Larkham was a really good sledger. He had to find the word sledge. I think Jaco Piper was his guest, and he had to help him with what's that English word, sledge. And apparently Bernie's quite the sledger.
I kind of did know that. Doesn't mind it, and he's.
Gregan we knew about. I didn't know. I didn't know about.
It's always the quiet ones you've got to worry about. Just so unassuming, and like when he played, he was able to get looks. Yeah, exactly. Anything else, mate? I think we're done.
It's going to be a good weekend. Looking forward to it very, very much.
Yeah, I think so. But that then is another great episode of the 8-9 Combo Rugby Podcast done, and our sincere thanks to Jamie Wall for joining us this week. Harry and I remain on the socials in our usual places at Harry Baldy Jones and at BMC Sport. You can keep track of the 8-9 Combo on Twitter, on YouTube, on Blue Sky as well, and you can leave us a rating or review and share us as far and wide. Harry would really love you to go out and buy Jeff Park's great book, When the Deep Dark Bush Swallows You Whole, and Jeff will be paying our marketing invoice sometime soon, I'm quite sure. This is the 8-9 Combo, the short side set piece combination you didn't realize you needed in a rugby podcast. I'm Brett McKay, he's Harry Jones, and we'll be back in your ears with the weekend post-mortem.
Come play with us.
Take it away, Shawnee.
Here goes Jones with another bruising run. He links up with McKay, who pops back to Jones. They can't. They won't. They will. What a try. The Dream Team Combo go in again.